Welcome, brave souls, to Dreadful Diaries, where the shadows whisper secrets and the night holds untold horrors. If you crave the thrill of the unknown, make sure to subscribe and join our community of fellow horror enthusiasts. Now, dim the lights, grab a blanket, and let's dive into our first tale of terror.
In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the mist clung to the trees like a shroud and the shadows danced in the fading light, there was a small town named Eldridge Hollow. The townsfolk were a superstitious lot, steeped in the old ways and tales of the mountains. Among the most chilling of these tales was that of the Skinwalker, a shape-shifting creature said to roam the woods, preying on the unsuspecting. One crisp autumn evening, a young man named Caleb, eager for adventure, decided to hike the trails that wound through the dense forest. He had heard the stories but dismissed them as mere folklore, the stuff of campfire tales meant to scare children. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a sense of bravado, he set off into the twilight. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the trees grew thicker, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Caleb felt a chill creep up his spine, but he pressed on, determined to conquer the trail. Hours passed, and the forest grew eerily silent. The usual sounds of rustling leaves and chirping crickets faded into an unsettling quiet. It was then that Caleb heard it, a low growl, deep and resonant, echoing through the trees. He froze, heart pounding, as the sound grew closer. "Just an animal," he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the fear. But as he turned to head back, he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. A large, shadowy figure slipped between the trees, its form shifting and undulating. Caleb's breath quickened. He turned to run, but the forest seemed to close in around him. The growl transformed into a chilling laugh, echoing through the trees. Panic surged through him as he stumbled over roots and rocks, the darkness swallowing him whole. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him, heavy and deliberate. He dared a glance over his shoulder and saw it. A creature with glowing eyes, its body morphing between that of a wolf and something far more sinister. It was the Skinwalker, and it was hunting him. Caleb sprinted, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could hear the creature gaining on him, its breath hot on his neck. He dashed through the underbrush, branches clawing at his skin, but he couldn't stop. He had to find a way out. In his frantic escape, he stumbled upon an old cabin, its weathered wood blending into the shadows. Desperate, he flung open the door and slammed it shut behind him. The cabin was dark and musty, filled with the scent of decay. He fumbled for a light switch, but nothing happened. The growling outside intensified, and Caleb could hear the creature pacing, its claws scraping against the wooden floor. He backed away, heart racing, and felt something cold and metallic under his hand, a rusted old lantern. He quickly lit it, casting flickering shadows across the room. As the light illuminated the cabin, he noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, remnants of an ancient ritual. The stories he had dismissed as mere folklore flooded back to him. The Skinwalker was not just a creature, it was a curse, a being that could only be repelled by the very symbols that adorned the cabin. With trembling hands, Caleb traced the symbols in the air, whispering the words he could barely remember from the tales. The growling outside turned into a furious howl, and the cabin shook as if the creature was trying to break in. Just as the door splintered under the weight of the beast, a blinding light erupted from the symbols, illuminating the cabin in a brilliant glow. The howling ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Caleb felt a surge of power as the light enveloped him, and he pressed on, completing the incantation. In an instant, the creature's form twisted and writhed, caught in the light. With a final, anguished scream, it vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only silence and the faint echo of its growl. Caleb collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The lantern flickered and dimmed, but the symbols on the walls glowed faintly, a reminder of the power that had saved him. He knew he had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, but the tales of the Skinwalker would haunt him forever. As dawn broke over the mountains, Caleb emerged from the cabin, forever changed. He had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale, but he would never forget the lesson learned. Some legends are rooted in truth, and the woods of Appalachia hold secrets best left undisturbed. From that day on, he warned others of the Skinwalker, ensuring that the stories would continue to echo through Eldritch Hollow, a chilling reminder of the shadows that. In the small town of Cedar Hollow, nestled in the Appalachian foothills, the CNO Railroad had once been a lifeline, connecting communities and transporting goods. But after a tragic accident decades ago, the tracks fell silent, and the townsfolk whispered of a ghostly train that roamed the fog-laden nights, carrying the spirits of those who perished in the disaster. The story began on a stormy night in 1947 when a freight train, laden with coal, collided with a passenger train at a treacherous bend in the tracks. The crash was catastrophic, claiming the lives of dozens, and the town was forever marked by the tragedy. As the years passed, the memory of that fateful night faded, but the legend of the phantom train grew stronger. One chilly autumn evening, a young woman named Clara, new to Cedar Hollow, decided to explore the old railroad tracks. She had heard the stories from her neighbors, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, she set out into the gathering fog. As she walked along the overgrown tracks, the air grew thick with mist, wrapping around her like a shroud. The silence was palpable, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine but pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath her feet, and a low rumble echoed through the fog. Clara's heart raced as she turned to see a faint light flickering in the distance. It grew brighter, illuminating the mist, and she realized with a jolt that it was the headlight of a train. Panic surged through her as she stumbled backward, but the train was unlike any she had ever seen. It was an old steam locomotive, its paint chipped and rusted, and the cars behind it were filled with shadowy figures, their faces obscured by the fog. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth. This was the phantom train, a spectral remnant of the past. The train approached, its whistle piercing the night, a haunting sound that sent chills down her spine. Clara felt an inexplicable pull, as if the train was calling to her. She stepped closer, entranced by the sight. The figures in the cars seemed to shift and sway, their expressions a mix of sorrow and longing. As the train slowed to a stop, Clara could see the faces more clearly, ghostly visages of those who had perished in the accident, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. She felt a wave of empathy wash over her, and she understood that they were trapped, forever bound to the tracks where their lives had been cut short. Suddenly, the conductor appeared at the door of the lead car, a tall figure in a faded uniform, his face obscured by shadows. He beckoned to her, and Clara felt an overwhelming urge to board the train. But as she took a step forward, a voice echoed in her mind, a warning from the spirits. "Do not board. You must help us find peace." Clara hesitated, torn between the desire to help and the instinct to flee. The train's whistle blew again, more insistent this time, and the conductor's gaze bore into her soul. She could feel the weight of their sorrow, the unfinished business that bound them to this world. Gathering her courage, Clara shouted into the fog, "What do you need? How can I help you find peace?" The train fell silent, and the figures turned their gaze toward her, their eyes glistening with hope. In that moment, Clara understood. The spirits needed their story to be told, their tragedy to be remembered. She promised them that she would share their tale, that she would ensure they were not forgotten. As she spoke, the fog began to lift, and the train's light dimmed. The conductor nodded, a faint smile breaking through the shadows. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "Remember us." With that, the train began to fade, the spectral figures dissolving into the mist. Clara watched in awe as the phantom train slowly vanished, leaving only the echo of its whistle behind. As dawn broke over Cedar Hollow, Clara returned to town, her heart heavy with the weight of the spirit's story. She shared the tale of the phantom train with the townsfolk, ensuring that the memory of those lost would live on. From that day forward, the legend of the C&O Railroad took on new life, a reminder of the past and the importance of remembrance. And on foggy nights, when the air was thick with mist, the townsfolk would gather by the tracks, listening for the distant whistle of the phantom train, knowing that the spirits of Cedar Hollow were finally at peace. In the heart of the small town of Willow Creek stood an old church, its once proud steeple now sagging and its stained glass windows shattered. The Willow Creek Baptist Church had been a place of worship for generations, but after a tragic fire claimed the lives of the beloved preacher, Reverend Samuel Hayes, and several parishioners, the church was abandoned, left to the ravages of time and nature. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the ghost of Reverend Hayes, claiming that on certain nights, his spirit could be seen wandering the empty pews, delivering sermons to an audience of shadows. Most dismissed the tales as mere folklore, but for those who had experienced the eerie echoes of his voice, the stories were all too real. One stormy evening, a curious young woman named Emily, new to Willow Creek, decided to investigate the old church. She had heard the whispers of the ghostly preacher and felt an inexplicable pull to uncover the truth. Armed with a flashlight and a notebook, she made her way through the overgrown path leading to the church. As she approached, the wind howled through the trees, and the air grew thick with anticipation. The church loomed before her, its dark silhouette framed by flashes of lightning. Taking a deep breath, Emily pushed open the creaking door, which groaned in protest as it swung wide. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and decay. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows across the floor. Emily's heart raced as she stepped inside, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. She felt a chill run down her spine, but her curiosity drove her forward. As she explored the sanctuary, she noticed the remnants of the church's former glory, pews lined with dust, a pulpit draped in cobwebs, and a Bible lying open on the floor, its pages yellowed with age. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the church, extinguishing her flashlight. Darkness enveloped her, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. Just then, she heard it, a voice, deep and resonant, echoing through the empty hall. "Brothers and sisters, we gather here today." The voice was unmistakably that of Reverend Hayes, and it sent shivers down her spine. Emily's heart raced as she fumbled for her flashlight, finally managing to turn it back on. The beam of light flickered to life, illuminating the pulpit where the preacher once stood. To her astonishment, she saw a faint figure, translucent and glowing, clad in a tattered black suit. Reverend Hayes was there, delivering his sermon to an invisible congregation, his eyes closed in fervor. "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand," he proclaimed, his voice echoing through the church. Emily stood frozen, torn between fear and fascination. She had heard the stories, but witnessing the ghostly preacher in action was something entirely different. As she watched, the figure seemed to sense her presence. He paused mid-sentence, his eyes opening to meet hers. A chill swept through the air, and Emily felt an overwhelming sadness emanating from the spirit. The Reverend's gaze was filled with longing, as if he were searching for something lost. "Why do you linger here, Reverend?" Emily found her voice, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "What binds you to this place?" The ghostly preacher sighed, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. "I am here to guide the lost, to offer solace to those who seek it. But my time is not yet done. I must deliver my message, but the fire took my flock, and I remain alone." Emily's heart ached for the spirit. She could feel the weight of his sorrow, the burden of unfinished business. "What can I do to help you find peace?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. The Reverend's expression softened, and he gestured toward the open Bible on the floor. "Read the words, share my message. Let the people know that faith endures, even in the face of tragedy. Help them remember." With a nod, Emily approached the pulpit, her heart racing. She opened the Bible, its pages crackling under her fingers. As she read the verses aloud, the church seemed to come alive. The air shimmered with energy, and the ghostly figure of Reverend Hayes stood beside her, his presence growing stronger. "Fear not, for I am with you," she read, her voice echoing through the empty hall. "I will never leave you nor forsake you." As she spoke, the church filled with a warm light, and the shadows began to recede. The spirit of the Reverend smiled, a look of gratitude washing over his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice now a gentle breeze. In the secluded valley of Silver Hollow, a river wound its way through the landscape, its waters shimmering under the moonlight. The locals called it the Singing River, a name steeped in legend and mystery. It was said that on certain nights, when the moon hung high and the stars twinkled like diamonds, the river would begin to sing, a haunting melody that lured unsuspecting souls to its banks, never to be seen again. The tale of the Singing River was well known among the townsfolk, who warned their children to stay away after dark. But for a young man named Jacob, the stories only fueled his curiosity. He had grown up hearing the whispers of the river's song, and as he approached his 21st birthday, he felt an irresistible pull to uncover the truth behind the legend. One fateful night, with the moon full and bright, Jacob set out toward the river, determined to experience the song for himself. The air was thick with anticipation as he made his way through the dense woods, the sounds of the night surrounding him. As he reached the riverbank, he was struck by the beauty of the scene before him. The water glistened like silver, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. As the clock struck midnight, a soft melody began to drift through the air, ethereal and enchanting. Jacob's heart raced as he listened, the sound wrapping around him like a warm embrace. It was a song unlike anything he had ever heard, filled with longing and sorrow, beckoning him closer. Compelled by the music, Jacob stepped to the water's edge, entranced by the shimmering surface. The river seemed to pulse with life, and he could almost see figures dancing beneath the water, their movements graceful and fluid. He felt a strange connection to the river, as if it were calling out to him, inviting him to join the dance. Suddenly, a voice broke through the melody, soft yet urgent. "Jacob, do not come closer." It was the voice of his childhood friend, Sarah, who had disappeared near the river 2 years prior. The memory of her laughter echoed in his mind, and he felt a pang of grief. "You must turn back. The river is not what it seems." But the song grew louder, drowning out her warning. Jacob's resolve wavered as he took another step toward the water, the pull of the river overwhelming. Just as he was about to plunge into the depths, he caught a glimpse of something beneath the surface, a face, pale and sorrowful, reaching out to him. In that moment, clarity struck him. The river was a trap, a siren's call that had claimed countless souls, including Sarah's. He stumbled back, shaking off the enchantment that had clouded his mind. "No! I won't let you take me," he shouted, his voice breaking through the melody. The song faltered, the river's surface rippling violently as if angered by his defiance. The figures beneath the water twisted and writhed, their faces contorted in anguish. Jacob turned and ran, the haunting melody fading behind him, replaced by the sound of rushing water and his own pounding heart. As he fled through the woods, the trees seemed to close in around him, branches clawing at his clothes. He could feel the river's presence behind him, a dark force that sought to reclaim him. But he pushed on, fueled by the memory of Sarah and the realization that he had escaped the river's grasp. Finally, he burst into the clearing where the town lay, gasping for breath. The night was still, the only sound the distant rustle of leaves. Jacob collapsed to the ground, trembling as he processed what had just happened. He had faced the legend of the singing river and lived to tell the tale, but the weight of the lost souls lingered in his heart. The next day, Jacob gathered the townsfolk, sharing his harrowing experience and the truth behind the river's song. He urged them to remember those who had vanished, to honor their memories and warn others of the danger that lurked in the waters. From that day forward, the legend of the singing river took on a new meaning. The townsfolk held vigils for the lost souls, lighting candles along the riverbank and singing songs of remembrance. The river, once a source of fear, became a place of healing, a reminder of the lives that had been claimed by its haunting melody. And on quiet nights, when the moon hung high and the stars twinkled above, the river would still sing. But now, the townsfolk listened with reverence, honoring the spirits of those who had come before, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. The Appalachian Trail, a winding path that stretches over 2,000 miles through the heart of the eastern United States, is a hiker's paradise. Towering trees, breathtaking vistas, and the promise of adventure draw thousands each year. But for those who stray from the well-trodden path, the trail holds a darker secret, a curse that has ensnared many unsuspecting souls. It was late September when a group of 4 friends, Megan, Jake, Sarah, and Tom, set out for a weekend hike on a section of the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina. They were seasoned hikers, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse themselves in nature. The air was crisp, and the leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the landscape in vibrant hues of red and gold. As they hiked, laughter and camaraderie filled the air. They shared stories, took pictures, and marveled at the beauty surrounding them. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the trail, they decided to set up camp for the night. After a hearty meal and a few rounds of ghost stories around the campfire, Tom suggested they explore a nearby side trail that he had heard about from a fellow hiker. "It's supposed to lead to a hidden waterfall," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Despite the warnings from the others about straying from the main path, curiosity got the better of them, and they agreed to check it out. With flashlights in hand, they ventured down the narrow trail, the sounds of the forest enveloping them. The deeper they went, the more the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, and an unsettling silence fell over the woods. The laughter that had filled the air was replaced by an eerie stillness, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist around them. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the waterfall. A stunning cascade of water that sparkled in the moonlight. But as they stood in awe, a chill ran down Megan's spine. She felt as if they were being watched. "Maybe we should head back," she suggested, glancing nervously at the dark woods surrounding them. Just a few more minutes, Tom insisted, stepping closer to the water's edge. We can take some pictures. As they snapped photos, a low rumble echoed through the trees, and the ground beneath them trembled slightly. The friends exchanged worried glances, but Tom laughed it off. "It's just the wind," he said, though his bravado faltered. Suddenly, the sound of rustling leaves broke the silence, and a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a tattered coat. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his presence sending a wave of dread through the group. "You shouldn't be here," he warned, his voice raspy and low. "The trail is cursed. Turn back before it's too late." Fear gripped the friends, and they exchanged anxious glances. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, trying to sound brave. "The spirits of those who've strayed from the path haunt these woods," the man replied, his gaze piercing. "They lead you astray, and once you're lost, you may never find your way back." Before they could respond, the man turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving them shaken. "We need to go back now," Megan urged, her voice trembling. Reluctantly, they retraced their steps, but the forest felt different. The trees loomed larger, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. The path that had once been clear now twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the woods. Panic set in as they realized they were lost. The familiar sounds of the forest had faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. "We should have never left the main trail," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. As they stumbled through the underbrush, the air grew colder, and a thick fog began to roll in, obscuring their surroundings. The friends called out to each other, but their voices echoed back, distorted and eerie. It felt as if the forest itself was mocking them. Hours passed, and exhaustion weighed heavily on them. Just when they thought they might find their way back, they heard it, a soft, melodic whisper carried on the wind. It was a haunting tune, sweet yet sorrowful, beckoning them deeper into the woods. "Do you hear that?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with fear. "It sounds like someone is calling us." "It's a trap," Megan shouted, her instincts screaming at her to resist. "We have to keep moving." But the others were entranced, drawn toward the sound. Tom took a step forward, his expression vacant. "It's beautiful, we have to see where it leads." In a desperate attempt to save her friends, Megan grabbed Tom's. In the small town of Flatwoods, West Virginia, nestled among the rolling hills and dense forests, a legend had taken root, a tale of a creature that had struck fear into the hearts of locals for decades. It was the summer of 1952 when the first sighting of the Flatwoods monster occurred, and since then, the creature had become a part of the town's folklore, a haunting presence that lingered in the minds of those who dared to speak of it. The story began on a crisp September evening when a group of boys, Teddy, his brother, and their friends, were playing football in a field just outside of town. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, they noticed a strange light flickering in the sky. Intrigued, they abandoned their game and ran toward the source of the glow, their hearts racing with excitement. As they approached a nearby hill, the light intensified, illuminating the area with an otherworldly glow. The boys reached the top and gasped in shock. There, in a clearing, stood a tall figure, unlike anything they had ever seen. It was at least 10 feet tall, with a spindly body and a large, round head that seemed to glimmer in the fading light. Its eyes were bright and piercing, and it wore a metallic suit that shimmered like the stars. "What is that?" whispered Teddy, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. Before anyone could answer, the creature turned its gaze toward them, and a chill ran down their spines. The boys stood frozen, unable to move as the creature raised its arms, revealing long, claw-like fingers. It emitted a low, guttural sound that resonated through the air, sending shivers down their spines. In a panic, the boys turned and ran, their hearts pounding in their chests. They sprinted back to town, breathless and terrified, desperate to tell the adults what they had seen. But when they reached the safety of their homes, they were met with skepticism. The townsfolk dismissed their story as a figment of their imagination, a trick of the light, or perhaps a prank gone wrong. But Teddy and his friends knew what they had seen. Over the following days, strange occurrences began to plague Flatwoods. Livestock went missing, crops wilted overnight, and an unsettling feeling settled over the town. Whispers of the Flatwoods monster spread like wildfire, and fear gripped the community. Determined to uncover the truth, Teddy and his friends decided to return to the clearing where they had first encountered the creature. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravery, they ventured into the woods one fateful night, the moon casting an eerie glow on the path ahead. As they approached the clearing, the air grew thick with tension. The boys exchanged nervous glances, but their curiosity pushed them forward. Suddenly, the same strange light flickered in the distance, illuminating the trees with an otherworldly glow. The boys froze, their hearts racing as they realized they were not alone. The Flatwoods monster emerged from the shadows, its tall figure towering over them. Panic surged through Teddy as he felt the weight of fear pressing down on him. "We need to get out of here," he shouted, but the creature's gaze held them captive. In that moment, the creature let out a piercing shriek, a sound that echoed through the woods and sent the boys scrambling in all directions. Teddy stumbled and fell, his flashlight flickering as he tried to regain his footing. The creature advanced, its long limbs moving with an unnatural grace. Just as Teddy thought he would be caught, he remembered the stories of the creature's weakness, bright light. With a surge of adrenaline, he turned his flashlight toward the monster, the beam cutting through the darkness. The creature paused, its eyes narrowing as it recoiled from the light. Seizing the opportunity, Teddy scrambled to his feet and ran, calling for his friends. They regrouped, their fear driving them forward as they sprinted through the woods, the creature's shrieks echoing behind them. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of the town, breathless and terrified. The next day, the boys shared their harrowing experience with the townsfolk, but this time, the fear was palpable. The sightings of the Flatwoods monster had become too frequent to ignore. People began to report strange noises at night, and the feeling of being watched settled over the town like a heavy fog. As the weeks passed, the creature's presence loomed larger in the minds of the townsfolk. Some claimed to have seen it lurking in the shadows, while others reported strange lights flickering in the sky. The fear of the Flatwoods monster became a part of the town's identity, a haunting reminder of the unknown. Determined to confront their fears, Teddy and his friends organized a town meeting, inviting everyone to share their experiences and discuss. In the quiet town of Millstone, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, stood an old, abandoned mill. Once a bustling hub of activity, the Millstone Mill had fallen into disrepair after a tragic accident claimed the life of a beloved worker named Henry Caldwell. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the ghostly figure that was said to wander the grounds, a shadowy presence that appeared on foggy nights, searching for something lost. The legend of the lonesome ghost of the old mill was well known among the residents, but for a group of adventurous teenagers, Lily, Mark, Sarah, and Jake, the stories were nothing more than a thrill-seeking challenge. One crisp autumn evening, emboldened by tales of the ghost, they decided to explore the mill, eager to uncover the truth behind the haunting. As they approached the mill, the air grew thick with anticipation. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the crumbling structure. Vines snaked up the walls, and the sound of rustling leaves filled the air. The group exchanged nervous glances but pressed on, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, the mill was a labyrinth of shadows and dust. Old machinery lay scattered about, remnants of a time long gone. The atmosphere was heavy, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. As they ventured deeper into the mill, the floorboards creaked beneath their feet, echoing through the empty halls. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "What if the stories are true?" "Come on, it's just a ghost story," Mark replied, trying to sound brave. "We'll be fine." As they explored, they stumbled upon a narrow staircase leading to the upper level. Curiosity piqued, they decided to climb, the air growing colder with each step. When they reached the top, they found themselves in a dimly lit room filled with old tools and forgotten memories. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic surged through the group as they fumbled to turn them back on. When the lights flickered back to life, they were met with a chilling sight, a figure standing at the far end of the room. The ghostly apparition was tall and gaunt, dressed in tattered work clothes, with hollow eyes that seemed to gaze right through them. It was Henry Caldwell, the spirit of the mill worker, forever trapped in the place where he had met his tragic end. "Help me," the ghostly figure whispered, his voice echoing like a distant memory. The teenagers stood frozen, fear gripping their hearts. They had heard the stories, but nothing could prepare them for the reality of the ghost before them. What do you want?" Lily stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The ghost pointed toward a dark corner of the room, where a pile of debris lay. "Find it, my last breath, my lost hope." Without thinking, Jake stepped forward, compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity. He began to clear away the debris, his hands trembling. As he dug deeper, he uncovered a small, rusted locket, its surface tarnished by time. He held it up, the faint glimmer of the metal catching the light. The ghost's expression softened, and a look of gratitude washed over his face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice filled with sorrow. "I can finally rest." But just as the words left his lips, the atmosphere shifted. The room grew colder, and the shadows deepened. The ghost began to fade, his form becoming translucent. "Beware the darkness, it seeks to claim you." Before they could react, the ground trembled beneath them, and the walls of the mill seemed to close in. Panic surged through the group as they scrambled to escape, the ghost's warning echoing in their minds. They raced down the staircase, the sound of their footsteps pounding against the wood. As they burst through the front door, the night air hit them like a wave, and they stumbled into the safety of the moonlight. They turned to look back at the mill, now shrouded in darkness, the ghostly figure no longer visible. Breathless and shaken, they gathered together, the weight of what they had experienced settling over them. Did that really just happen? Mark gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I think we helped him," Lily said, her voice trembling. "He wanted us to find that locket." As they made their way back to town, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a sense of unease. The legend of the lonesome ghost of the old mill had become their reality, and they knew they would never look at the mill the same way again. In the days that followed, the townsfolk noticed a change. The oppressive atmosphere surrounding In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the mist clung to the trees and the nights were filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant howls, there existed a legend that had been passed down through generations, the tale of the Moon-Eyed People. This mysterious race was said to have lived in the mountains long before the arrival of settlers, known for their pale skin, large eyes, and nocturnal habits. They were rumored to have vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and shadows. The story began with a young woman named Clara, who had grown up in the small town of Pine Hollow. Fascinated by the legends of her ancestors, she spent her evenings poring over old books and listening to the tales told by the elders. The Moon-Eyed People intrigued her the most. Their mysterious disappearance and the strange occurrences surrounding their legend captivated her imagination. One fateful night, driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure, Clara decided to explore the woods where the Moon-Eyed People were said to have lived. Armed with a flashlight and a notebook, she set out into the dense forest, the moonlight guiding her way. The air was cool and crisp, and the sounds of the night surrounded her, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. As she ventured deeper into the woods, Clara felt a strange energy in the air, as if the forest itself was alive. The trees loomed tall and ancient, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers. She followed a narrow path that wound through the underbrush, her heart racing with excitement and trepidation. After walking for what felt like hours, Clara stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood a circle of stones, weathered and covered in moss. It was a sacred site, she realized, a place where the Moon-Eyed People had once gathered. As she stepped into the circle, a sense of calm washed over her, and she felt an inexplicable connection to the land. Suddenly, a soft rustling sound broke the silence, and Clara turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a woman, her skin pale as moonlight, with long, flowing hair that shimmered like silver. Her eyes were large and luminous, reflecting the light of the moon. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized she was standing before one of the legendary Moon-Eyed People. "Who are you?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Leora," the woman replied, her voice melodic and soothing. "I have waited long for someone to find this place." Clara's heart raced with disbelief and wonder. "You're real. The stories, they're true." Leora smiled sadly, her expression filled with a mix of joy and sorrow. "Yes, we were once a part of this land, living in harmony with nature. But the world changed, and we were forced to retreat into the shadows." "What happened to you?" Clara asked, her curiosity piqued. "The settlers came, driven by greed and fear. They could not understand us, and in their ignorance, they sought to drive us away. We became the stuff of legends, our existence forgotten by time." Leora's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But we are still here, hidden from the world, waiting for someone to remember." Clara felt a pang of empathy for the woman before her. "How can I help you? How can I make people remember?" Leora's gaze turned serious. "You must share our story, tell the world of our existence. But be warned, the shadows that drove us away still linger. They do not wish for our return." Just then, a chilling wind swept through the clearing, and Clara felt a sudden sense of danger. The shadows around them deepened, and she could hear whispers in the wind, dark and foreboding. "You must go," Leora urged, her voice urgent. "The time is not yet right." Clara hesitated, torn between her desire to learn more and the instinct to flee. "I won't forget you," she promised, her heart heavy with the weight of the encounter. As she turned to leave, Leora reached out, her fingers brushing Clara's arm. "Remember, the truth is powerful. Share it wisely." With that, Clara raced back through the woods, the shadows closing in around her. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind, but she pressed on, driven by the urgency of her mission. When she finally emerged from the forest, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the world. In the days that followed, Clara dedicated herself to sharing the story of the Moon-Eyed People. She spoke to anyone who would listen, recounting the tale of Leora and the tragic fate of her people. The townsfolk were captivated, and slowly, the legend began to take root once more. As the years passed, in the heart of West Virginia, where the mountains rose steep and proud, lay the small town of Coal Hollow. The town was built on the backs of miners who toiled in the dark depths of the earth, extracting the black gold that fueled the nation. But the mines were not just a source of livelihood, they were also a place of tragedy. Over the years, countless miners had lost their lives in accidents, and their spirits were said to linger in the tunnels, warning the living of impending danger. The legend of the ghostly miners was well known among the townsfolk, but for a young man named Ethan, it was just another story meant to scare children. He had grown up hearing tales of the spirits that roamed the mines, but he dismissed them as mere folklore. That was until he took a job at the Coal Hollow mine, eager to follow in his father's footsteps. On his first day, Ethan was filled with excitement and trepidation. The foreman, a grizzled old man named Hank, gathered the new recruits and shared the history of the mine. "Listen up, boys," he said, his voice gravelly. "This mine has seen its share of accidents. Some say the spirits of the miners who died down there still roam the tunnels, warning us of danger. You do well to heed their whispers." Ethan chuckled under his breath, brushing off Hank's words. As the crew descended into the mine, the air grew cooler, and the darkness enveloped them. The sound of pickaxes striking coal echoed through the tunnels, and the men worked diligently, their laughter and camaraderie filling the air. But as the days turned into weeks, Ethan began to notice strange occurrences. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, and he often felt a chill run down his spine, as if someone were watching him. One evening, as he was finishing his shift, he heard a faint whisper echoing through the tunnels. "Get out, danger." Startled, he turned to his co-workers, but they were too engrossed in their work to notice. Dismissing it as his imagination, he continued, but the whispers grew more frequent, always warning him to leave. One fateful night, a storm rolled through Coal Hollow, and the mine was filled with an eerie silence. The crew was deep underground, working late to meet a deadline. As Ethan swung his pickaxe, he felt a sudden rush of cold air, and the whispers returned, louder this time. "Get out! Get out!" Panic surged through him, and he dropped his pickaxe. "We need to leave," he shouted, but the other miners laughed, thinking he was joking. Just then, a loud rumble echoed through the tunnels, and the ground shook violently. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling, and Ethan's heart raced. "Run!" he yelled, and this time, the urgency in his voice broke through the laughter. The crew scrambled toward the exit, but the rumbling grew louder, and the walls began to cave in. Ethan pushed forward, adrenaline coursing through his veins, the whispers now a cacophony of voices urging him on. As they reached the main shaft, the entrance collapsed behind them, sealing off their escape. The miners were trapped, panic setting in as they realized the gravity of the situation. But just as despair threatened to take hold, a figure appeared in the shadows, a ghostly miner, his face pale and eyes hollow. "Follow me," the spirit urged, his voice echoing through the chaos. Without hesitation, Ethan and the others followed the ghost, who led them through a series of narrow tunnels, the whispers guiding them toward safety. The air grew thick with dust, and the sound of falling rock echoed behind them, but the ghost pressed on, unwavering. Finally, they emerged into a small chamber, where a faint light flickered. The ghost turned to them, his expression solemn. "You must remember us. We died here, but we can still help those who come after." With that, the spirit faded into the shadows, leaving the miners in stunned silence. They quickly made their way to the surface, emerging into the stormy night, gasping for breath. The mine had collapsed behind them, but they were alive. In the days that followed, the miners shared their harrowing experience, and the legend of the ghostly miners grew stronger. Ethan, once a skeptic, became a believer, dedicating himself to honoring the spirits who had saved their lives. He organized memorials for the miners who had perished, ensuring their stories would not be forgotten. As the years passed, the whispers in the mine continued, a reminder of the spirits who roamed the tunnels, watching over the living. And whenever a new crew descended into the depths, they would hear the tales of the ghostly miners, warning them to heed the signs and respect the dangers of the dark, for the spirits of Coal Hollow would. The Appalachian Trail, a winding path that stretches through the heart of the eastern United States, is known for its breathtaking views and serene landscapes. But hidden among the trees and shadows lies a forgotten cabin, a place shrouded in mystery and whispered tales of the supernatural. Hikers who pass by often speak of strange noises and the unsettling feeling of being watched, but few dare to venture close enough to uncover the truth. One crisp autumn afternoon, a group of 4 friends, Maya, Ben, Sarah, and Jake, set out for a weekend hike along the trail. They were seasoned adventurers, eager to escape the chaos of city life and immerse themselves in nature. As they trekked deeper into the woods, the vibrant colors of fall surrounded them, and laughter filled the air. After several hours of hiking, they decided to take a break at a scenic overlook. As they sat on a fallen log, enjoying their snacks and the view, Ben pulled out a worn map he had found online. "Hey, check this out," he said, pointing to a small dot marked on the map. "It says there's an old cabin not far from here. They say it's haunted." Maya raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Haunted? By what?" "Some ghostly figure that watches hikers," Ben replied, a mischievous grin on his face. "We should check it out." The others exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Why not?" Sarah said, her adventurous spirit ignited. "It'll be fun." With a sense of adventure, they packed up their things and set off toward the cabin, following the faint trail marked on the map. As they walked, the atmosphere shifted. The trees grew denser, and the air felt heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. After a short hike, they finally stumbled upon the cabin, its weathered wood blending into the surrounding foliage. The roof sagged, and the windows were boarded up, giving it an eerie appearance. A chill ran down Maya's spine, but curiosity pushed her forward. "Let's take a look inside." The group approached the cabin cautiously, the creaking of the old wood echoing in the stillness. Ben pushed open the door, which groaned in protest, revealing a dark interior filled with dust and cobwebs. The air was stale, and the faint scent of decay lingered. As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The sunlight barely penetrated the gloom, and shadows danced along the walls. Jake shone his flashlight around the room, illuminating old furniture covered in sheets and a fireplace filled with ashes. "This place is creepy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the back of the cabin, causing them all to jump. "What was that?" Sarah exclaimed, her eyes wide with fear. "Probably just the wind," Ben said, trying to sound brave. But even he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over them. As they explored the cabin, strange noises continued to echo through the air, soft whispers, the sound of footsteps, and the creaking of the floorboards. Maya felt a chill run down her spine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. "Let's get out of here," she suggested, her voice trembling. But before they could leave, a figure appeared in the doorway, a ghostly silhouette, pale and ethereal, watching them with hollow eyes. The friends froze, terror gripping their hearts. The figure was dressed in tattered clothing, its face obscured by shadows. It seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and a sense of sorrow emanated from it. "Who are you?" Maya managed to ask, her voice shaking. The figure raised a hand, pointing toward the fireplace. A soft, mournful whisper filled the air, echoing through the cabin. "Help me." Without thinking, Maya stepped forward, drawn to the spirit. "What do you need?" she asked, her heart racing. The ghostly figure gestured again, and the friends exchanged nervous glances. "We should go," Jake urged, but Maya felt compelled to stay. As she approached the fireplace, she noticed something glimmering among the ashes, a small locket, tarnished and worn. She picked it up, feeling a surge of energy course through her. The ghost's expression softened, and a look of gratitude washed over its face. "Thank you," the spirit whispered, its voice barely audible. "Remember me." With that, the figure began to fade, the shadows retreating as the cabin filled with a warm light. The atmosphere shifted, and the oppressive weight that had hung in the air lifted. The friends stood in awe, their fear replaced by a sense of peace. As the last remnants of the ghost vanished, Maya turned to her friends, her heart racing. "We need to tell people about this." In the heart of Georgia, where the sun dipped low behind the rolling hills and the air was thick with the scent of magnolias, there lay a small, forgotten town named Willow Creek. It was a place steeped in history, where tales of old still whispered through the trees. Among these tales was one that sent shivers down the spines of the townsfolk, the legend of the Cherokee Rose. The Cherokee Rose, with its delicate white petals and golden center, was said to bloom only in the wake of tragedy. According to local lore, the flower was a symbol of sorrow, a reminder of the pain endured by the Cherokee people during their forced removal from their ancestral lands. But there was more to the story, a curse that befell anyone who dared to pick the flower. As the story went, those who plucked the Cherokee Rose would be haunted by misfortune, their lives unraveling in a series of tragic events. The townspeople had long learned to respect the flower, leaving it untouched in the wild, but curiosity has a way of leading even the most cautious astray. One fateful summer, a young woman named Clara moved to Willow Creek. She was drawn to the town's charm and the stories that lingered in the air. Clara was a budding photographer, eager to capture the beauty of her new surroundings. One afternoon, while exploring the woods, she stumbled upon a clearing filled with Cherokee roses, their petals glistening in the sunlight. Entranced by their beauty, Clara felt an irresistible urge to capture the moment. She raised her camera, snapping photos of the flowers, but as she did, a strange feeling washed over her, a sense of foreboding that she couldn't shake. Ignoring the warning bells in her mind, she reached out and plucked a single rose, its stem smooth and cool against her fingers. That night, Clara dreamt of shadows and whispers. She saw the faces of the Cherokee people, their eyes filled with sorrow, and she felt their pain as if it were her own. When she awoke, a chill ran down her spine, but she brushed it off as a mere nightmare. The following days were filled with strange occurrences. Clara's camera malfunctioned, her car broke down, and she received a series of unsettling phone calls from unknown numbers. Each day, the misfortunes piled up, and Clara began to feel the weight of the curse pressing down on her. Desperate for answers, she sought out the town's oldest resident, a woman named Agnes, who was known for her knowledge of local lore. Agnes listened intently as Clara recounted her experiences, her expression growing grave. "You've picked the Cherokee rose, haven't you?" Agnes said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must return it to the earth, or the curse will only grow stronger." Clara's heart raced. "But how? I didn't mean to." Agnes interrupted, "You must go back to the clearing at dawn, before the sun rises. Apologize to the spirits and return the rose to its roots. Only then can you break the curse." With a heavy heart, Clara prepared for the journey. As dawn approached, she made her way to the clearing, the weight of the rose in her pocket feeling heavier with each step. The woods were eerily silent, the air thick with tension. When she reached the spot, the first light of day broke through the trees, illuminating the flowers that surrounded her. Clara knelt down, her hands trembling as she placed the rose back into the earth. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to disturb you. Please forgive me." As she buried the rose, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down her spine. For a moment, Clara felt a presence around her, a warmth that enveloped her like a gentle embrace. The air shifted, and she sensed the weight of the curse lifting. But just as she began to feel relief, a loud crack echoed through the woods. Clara turned to see a massive tree branch breaking free from its trunk, crashing down toward her. In a split second, she dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the falling debris. Heart racing, she scrambled to her feet and ran from the clearing, the sound of the branch crashing behind her. When she reached the safety of the town, Clara looked back at the woods, her heart pounding. She had escaped, but the encounter left her shaken. The curse had been real, and she had narrowly avoided its grasp. In the days that followed, Clara found solace in her photography, capturing the beauty of Willow Creek without disturbing its secrets. The Cherokee rose remained untouched in the woods, a reminder of the past and the respect it demanded. And though the curse had been lifted, Clara knew she would never forget the lesson learned. Some beauty is meant to be admired from a distance, a delicate balance between. In the early 19th century, in the rolling hills of Adams, Tennessee, the Bell family lived a quiet, pastoral life. John Bell, a farmer, and his wife, Lucy, had several children, but it was their youngest daughter, Betsy, who would become the focal point of a haunting that would echo through history, the tale of the Bell Witch. It began in 1817, when John Bell first noticed strange occurrences on their farm. At first, it was subtle, the sound of rustling leaves when no wind blew, the faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and the occasional sighting of a shadow flitting through the trees. But as the days turned into weeks, the disturbances escalated. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, a loud banging erupted from the walls of their home. The noise was so violent that it rattled the dishes on the table. The family exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to make of the commotion. John, ever the rational man, dismissed it as a prank or perhaps a wild animal. But the disturbances continued, growing more intense and more personal. Betsy, a bright and spirited girl of just 12, became the primary target of the unseen force. She would wake in the night to find her bed shaking violently, her hair being pulled, and a voice whispering her name. The voice was both chilling and familiar, taunting her with secrets only she would know. It called itself Kate, claiming to be the spirit of a witch who had been wronged by the Bell family. As the haunting intensified, the family sought help. Neighbors and friends came to witness the strange happenings, and many were left in disbelief. Some claimed it was a hoax, while others were convinced that the Bell family was cursed. The local community was divided, and the Bell family found themselves at the center of a growing spectacle. One night, a group of men gathered at the Bell home to investigate the disturbances. They set up a vigil, determined to confront the spirit. As the clock struck midnight, the air grew thick with tension. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room, and the men jumped to their feet, their hearts racing. They felt an unseen force push against them, and one man was thrown across the room, landing in a heap against the wall. The Bell family was terrified, but they refused to leave their home. They believed that confronting the spirit was the only way to reclaim their lives. Betsy, emboldened by her family's support, decided to confront Kate directly. One evening, she stood in the center of the living room, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Why are you tormenting us?" she called out. "What do you want?" The response was immediate. The walls shook, and a voice filled the room, echoing with anger. "I want justice," it cried. "Your father has wronged me." Betsy's heart raced as she realized that the spirit was seeking revenge for a perceived injustice. John Bell had been accused of cheating a local woman, and Kate claimed that her spirit had been wronged by his actions. The haunting was not just a random act of malice, it was a manifestation of anger and betrayal. Determined to put an end to the torment, John Bell sought the help of a local spiritualist. The woman arrived at the Bell home, her presence commanding and confident. She called upon the spirit, demanding to know what it wanted. The air crackled with energy as Kate's voice filled the room once more. "I want him to pay for what he has done," the spirit shrieked, the walls vibrating with its fury. The spiritualist, undeterred, proposed a solution. "You must forgive him," she said, her voice steady. "Only then can you find peace." The spirit hesitated, the air thick with tension. After a moment, it relented. "I will forgive him, but he must acknowledge my pain." John Bell, shaken but resolute, stepped forward. "I acknowledge your pain, and I am sorry for the hurt I have caused. I never meant to wrong you." As the words left his lips, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive weight that had hung over the family began to lift, and the disturbances gradually subsided. The Bell family felt a sense of relief wash over them, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. But the peace was short-lived. In the months that followed, John Bell's health began to decline. He became increasingly frail, plagued by mysterious ailments that left doctors baffled. Betsy and Lucy watched helplessly as the man they loved faded before their eyes. One fateful night, as the family gathered around John's bedside, the spirit returned. It whispered in Betsy's ear, "He will pay for his sins." The word sent chills down her spine, and she realized that the curse had not been lifted after all. Days later,